Coric V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Coric V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
All right, what is up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Pro Physique Code podcast. So today is a little special because if you're watching on YouTube, you obviously have caught on, but it is me, Lexie, and then I have a special guest on today, Miss Lawna Dunbar. How are you, Lana?
Hello, doing well, Lexie. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Yes, you're so welcome. So today, obviously, we're, Paul, Evan, giving them, a week off, and it's girl chat today. So Lana and I are going to kind of dive into more of a girl chat topic. We're going to talk all about presentation, like posing, stage presentation. We're also going to dive into, and I think we can, get a little bit into just over like finding your look on stage, right? Because there's no doubt that with bikini, and honestly, any female division, and especially with this new division that they just announced, the fit model, like the look, the glam, it's really important, right? And it's, I get a lot of questions from especially my first time competitors about, things when it comes to their suit, their hair, their makeup, their posing, all of that. So we're going to dive into all that fun stuff today. So yeah, so I guess, for those people who are listening who are not familiar with Lana, I want to kind of give you some time to introduce yourself, just kind of talk about, who you are, what you've done, so that way you can kind of set the scene for starters.
Totally. So my name's Lawna Dunbar. I have been with Pro Physique for going on, it'll be probably 3 years next June. So a little while now. I first found Paul Revelia on YouTube because I had gotten back into the bodybuilding scene after taking 7 years off of stage. And me and my husband were like, hey, let's see if we still got it, if we can do it. And we started prepping ourselves, but I knew I needed more like nutritional help. So I reached out to Paul and was able to join his team. And my husband works with Steven, also Team Pro Physique. And then I just started my journey with Paul, trying to get my pro card. And from working with him from June until December, I ended up earning my pro card at the Ben Weider in 2021. Which was amazing. Only like 6 months together, like got that pro card at the end of the year. It was so exciting. And, then I wanted to see where I would land in pro bikini. So we made my pro debut that same December at a battle up in Texas. And I ended up getting 5th place. So I was like, oh my gosh, I just placed first at my first pro show. And we did a little mini off season, and then we came back in spring of 2022, did a couple string of shows, had really great placings and top 5 call outs. And that was back when they did the point system. So I was like, Paul, do you think that I could like make a run for the O in my rookie season? And he was like, I don't see why not. Like, you're doing well. So we did another little mini reverse, and then we came back in the fall and again did a string of shows. And shockingly, like, I don't know how it all worked out, but I ended up making it to Olympia of 2022. And that Olympia was my 14th pro show. So that was like literally a 21-year-old dream came realized at the age of, I think I was 30 at the time when I went to my first Olympia. So that was literally so amazing. I never thought that could be possible for me. And then we took all of 2023 off, no competitions, no shows, and then came back in 2024 in August. And this time around, on my 4th pro show of this season at the Ben Weider Natural again, I was able to earn first place, my first ever first place, and we're going back to Olympia 2025. So
Oh, I'm so excited for you. So excited for you. And I think, it's worth mentioning too, because I know a lot of people know you from this. Like, you are a lifetime natural athlete. So you got your pro card naturally. You are Olympia qualified naturally. And I think that's something that, that's worth mentioning, right? A lot of people love to hear that. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. And remind me, so okay, so the year that you qualified for the Olympia on the point system, how many shows did you do? Like how many pro
Mhm.
shows did you do? Because I remember, I mean, following you at that time. I don't think I'd ever met you, but I remember following you, and
Yeah.
I remember like you were really working hard to get those points and make it to the Olympia. And so how many shows did you do that season, pro show wise?
Definitely. I think counting my pro debut in December 2022, I think Olympia was my 14th pro show. Or I could be wrong. It could have been my 15th, but 14 or 15 if I count that December show before the new year started. So yeah, it was a lot of shows back to back, that whole like
Yeah.
spring season and then that whole fall season. And it was, you know, it was obviously it wasn't easy. Like I had to make a lot of tough decisions of like, should I go do this show? Should I not go do this show? Like, um, but yeah, what kind of solidified me continuing to go is when I came back for the fall season, I did the NPC mother load, and that was a higher tier show because back when you had points, there were different tiers to shows. And that was like a tier 2 show. And I ended up getting second, which gave me 6 points, which really added to the amount of points that I had. I think I ended up with like 30 plus points in order to get to Olympia. It was me and Jody Jean Yonker and another foreign girl, I can't remember her name, that ended up getting to go because it's top 3 for points, but they don't do that anymore. So
Yeah, that was an exciting time, but I always kind of wonder if they'll bring back the point system. I don't know.
yeah,
But and I think also like this will definitely kind of segue us into our topic today too. I think it's worth mentioning that you won at this past year at the National Fit Show. You won the first ever like Gilco
yeah,
presentation posing award. So, that just goes to show like
totally.
you have such a cool, like I love watching you on stage because I feel like you have such a cool kind of unique and authentic style of posing. And I encourage anybody listening to this, if you've never watched Lana on stage, like go to her Instagram, look at some of her videos of her posing, because like I just love the way you take the routine but you make it your own, right? Like you make it your own, you put your little flair on it,
Yes,
and you got that award at National Fit Show, which is really really cool. And you obviously you have your posing business, so I want to
totally.
today talk a lot about the importance of posing, and I think we can even get into talking about just very generalized like common mistakes we see a lot of bikini girls making on stage, and then obviously we'll talk about the glam side of things too. But I guess, yeah, a question for you. So have you always loved posing, or was that something that you kind of got or fell more in love with as you after you turned pro?
Right. I think it definitely evolved as like I evolved. Honestly, in a weird way, doing 14 shows was probably the best thing that could have happened for me in the way of progressing my posing, because every time I did a show, I learned something about my posing and then I tweaked it, I changed it. I added something, I took something away. And just the more stage time that I had, I feel like the more comfortable I got, the better I got. And it truly did evolve. A little background why I think I love it so much, and it comes like a little more natural, is I did grow up doing dance. I danced from the age of 7 to 17, and I did ballet, lyrical, point, hip hop, just a variety, pretty much everything but tap. I didn't do tap. But so bodybuilding is oddly like satisfying because it's the stage, it's the lights, it's the extra makeup, it's the hair, and then it's the performance for me. So it is very reminiscent of, my dancing stage days, except this time we're showing off muscles instead of, our costume or whatever. So I feel like it's definitely evolved over time. And I think it's one of the things in bodybuilding that gets forgotten because especially if you're a new entry level competitor, you're working so hard on hitting your nutrition and your workouts and ticking all those boxes. But if you don't equally put in, a third of your energy into your posing, your presentation, your suit, your look, your makeup, your, everything top to bottom, you're leaving so much off the table because that's all you get judged on that day. So it's something to really think about and plan and, take action early if you can, and just put in the hours, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I can fully attest to the fact that when I first decided to compete, I was a freshman in college. Like I was really young and I lived in a triple dorm room, so literally just like a room with two other girls. And I
Yeah.
kind of made the excuse at the time of like, well, I didn't really have a place to practice my posing, which now that I think back at it, I'm like, that was a total excuse. Like you could have found a way, but I didn't practice a ton. And I had a great physique at the time, but I always wonder, okay, like if I had actually like worked on my posing, would I have placed a little bit better? Because you're so
Yeah.
posing is so important. I mean, I always think about it this way. The judges don't have time to imagine how you would look. Like when you're on stage, what you present is what they see, right? Like they don't have time to like sit there and think like, oh wow, if she was hitting her front pose a little bit differently, like she would look really good. Like they see what you present on stage. And for the listeners, if you guys have been around for a while, you guys probably remember earlier this year, Paul and I interviewed Sandy Williamson, and I remember I asked her, I was like, Sandy, in your opinion, like what really stands out to you as a judge on stage? Like if you could just choose one thing. And she told me, she's like, just that confidence and that presentation and the posing. She's like, you just can tell the girls that have that it factor and the girls that have practice and who are
Yeah.
confident, right? And I know a lot of newer competitors, are not always very confident for the first time on stage. But I always say, like, fake it till you make it, right? Like, even if you don't feel confident, you should look confident on stage because the judges can
Yeah.
see right through that, right? Like, they look at enough,
Exactly.
they can tell the girls who are really nervous and they can tell, the girls who are not nervous, right? So even if you are nervous, like, don't let that be seen on stage because that's not going to help you, right? And it kind of almost makes the
Yeah.
judges think, well, why is she nervous? Is she trying to like hide something from us, right? So
Yeah.
in your opinion, so what do you typically recommend with girls who are brand new to the sport? So let's say theoretically, somebody is thinking about competing. What do you typically tell people for when should you start practicing posing? When should you hire a posing coach? What do you generally tell people?
Yeah, honestly, I usually tell my clients the more you put in, the more you're going to get out, right? So if you know you're doing a show in 6 months, why not start your posing now? Because if you can get down your individual routine, then you can practice it morning, noon, and night between sets at the gym, when you're home, when you're standing in front of a random mirror at the store. If you have the foundation of your individual routine, the earlier the better, because you want to make it like you're riding a bike. You don't want to have to think about the transition. What is my arm doing next? How are my feet getting into the T position? Like you don't want to think about all those things. So if you know you're doing a show in 6 months, start your posing, find a posing coach, educate yourself, be a student of the sport, watch all the different pros, you know, take things take things from everyone and try it and then see what works for you and what looks authentically you. I'm very much about building a posing routine that is genuine to your style. Like when I do consults with everyone, I'll always ask, like, are you bubbly and upbeat? Do you want to be crisp and precise? Are you a little more flamboyant and extra? So we want to make sure that your style matches your energy, and then you're going to be the most confident up there. So like if I ask a girl to be doing these big extra arms and that's not her, she's going to feel awkward, right? So we never want that to be what's coming across. But for posing, the earlier the better. Just start, get going, build the foundation of your routine, and then go from there.
Yeah. No, I always tell my girls the same thing. I always say, because I work with a lot of first time competitors, but a lot of girls come to me too, like as lifestyle first, and then they eventually transition to becoming a competitor. And I say the moment you know that competing is in your future and that maybe it's something you want to do, I always tell girls, get a pair of heels. I'll usually say, like, for a week or two, when you get the heels, put them on, wear them around the house, kind of break them in, because you can't usually successfully start practicing
No.
your body unless like you know how to walk in heels, right? A lot of girls don't. A lot of girls
Yeah.
heels regularly, right? So
Mhm.
it's important to break those heels in first. And then I always recommend, get some posing sessions right off the get-go. Cause I get a lot of girls too that will ask like, well, Lexie, could you send me a video? Like, is there a good video I can learn from? And there are,
Yeah.
some like very basic videos that you can find out there on YouTube, but I personally don't recommend starting there because I remember when I first started competing, I did that and I learned a lot of bad habits that were really
Yes. Yep.
big. And I think what people don't realize is that with posing, it's not just like, I mean, yes, there's a very basic routine that everybody kind of follows, right? But, when we're talking like certain angles with your core and your front pose or certain,
Yes.
positions, like it's very individual on the physique, right? You are posing in a way
Yes.
that is showcasing your physique and making your physique fit the criteria of that division best, right? So it's hard to find a video out there that's gonna, teach you exactly what you need to do for posing. So I always tell girls, get a couple posing sessions with a reputable posing coach. You are one of them. And also, I think something else to mention too is like, I know probably the majority of your clients that you pose, you do it online, right? So do you feel like
Yeah.
online posing sessions can be just as beneficial as in person? Because I think a lot of girls have that fear of like, well, I don't want to do online. I don't feel like I'm going to be able to learn as good. But do you feel like they can be just as
Right.
successful?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in this past year, this was my first year opening my posing presentation. So I believe February will be a year, but all of my clients have been online. Your coach will hopefully just know different ways to try to truly get the correct proportions and angles and visuals and all of those things to know if they have you like proportionate in the posing that they're doing for you. For example, like when I have a girl do a back pose, I'll have her hold the back pose, but then I'll also ask her to hold it sideways so I can check her posture and her knees and like all of those other things to make sure, okay, is she, locking out her legs and doing hyperextension, or is she doing like an RDL push, or is she standing tall through her chest? And, your coach will basically spin you all the way around trying to make sure and check on those angles for you. They'll hopefully make sure your camera or tripod is set up at waist level, because if your camera's really low, you're going to look bottom heavy. If it's really high, you're going to look disproportionate. So they'll hopefully get you set up so that everything is just so, and it is beneficial. A lot of what I do, because also background, I'm a teacher, like that's my profession. I'm a PE teacher. So a lot of what I'll do or use in my teaching is giving cues, so that you can do little mental checks, like are my hands in little cinnamon rolls, like are my hips 45 degrees and things like that. So with the cues and the screenshots and the screen recordings and the homework that you get from your coach, it's so beneficial. And online doesn't really matter. Online, is so effective. In person, of course, would be the best, but online's just as good.
I agree. I agree. I think that's what I always tell my girls. I always say online, I think especially if you have a good posing coach or somebody who knows what they're doing, like we learn what cues can definitely be like helpful for clients, right? So and it's hard. Like
Yeah.
I get that, finding somebody in person can be great, but like to be honest, it can be really hard to find a really good like in-person posing coach depending on where you live, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't even think of
Yeah.
where I live in Florida. Like I can't think of somebody honestly in the area that like it's just hard to find somebody who's a good reputable posing coach in person, right? So yeah, I
Right.
think online is perfect. And I also like what you said about like we're able to take screenshots and give people homework. So and I think, as long as a posing client, you come to a posing session virtually with a proper setup, you will be fine, right? I
Yep.
think setup is important.
Yeah.
Like I know I tend to be very nitpicky with my girls about like lighting, and it comes from a
Yes.
place though, right? Like if I have a
Yeah.
girl posing in like a very dark room and her physique is all shadowy, it's hard to kind of see as a coach like the positioning we need to put her
Yeah.
in to make her waist look smallest and really get that shape to pop, right? So yeah, so I think, more of the story, the sooner you can hire a posing coach, the better. And I just think I know a lot of girls, want to save money wherever they can for prep, but I truthfully
Yeah.
feel like posing coaching is something you should not skimp out on. You know, even if you're
Yeah.
trying to make money, I think it's important to at least get a couple of sessions with a good posing coach, because that can just be so
Yeah.
valuable.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I hear a ding?
Oh no, I had my email did ding a second ago. I accidentally forgot to shut that off of my computer, but we're good
Okay.
now. But yeah, so okay, so now
Okay.
let's talk about kind of before we get into some of these questions too, because we did put a question box out. I want to hear from you. What do you feel like is some like what are some common mistakes you feel like you see a lot as a posing coach from girls like repetitively? Because I feel like there's a lot of things like I see all the time, but I want to hear from you what you feel like are some common mistakes you see all the time.
Totally. Um, I will say I see. Okay, so what I know from Sandy is short and sweet is better. As I've heard her say, like time and time again, in all of the posing seminars that she does, the longer you're on stage, the more we are going to see your flaws. Because when you're up there, we're not looking for what is right. We're looking for what is like wrong comparatively to other people, right? So when I see a lot of like NPC level athletes doing these extra transitional like steps and flowery movements and extra like, back step, hip sway, this, that in their routines, I feel like it opens up the door for judgment versus if I were to be like short and precise, like step, pivot, flip around, here's my transition pose, here's my front pose. I find that that comes off cleaner, more confident, and gives less room for judgment. I don't know if you can agree with that, but what do you think?
Would I like that you mentioned that, because I think that especially for amateur competitors, short and sweet. Like you have what 15 seconds to do your individual routine. Not that they're
Yeah.
like, necessarily timing you, but it's also like you
Right.
said, the longer you're on stage, the longer you're lingering on stage, the more time you're giving the judges to pick apart your flaws. And I like what you said about like the judges are not always looking for what's right. They're looking for what's wrong in your physique,
Yes.
relatively speaking. So yeah, I always say short and sweet or simple is better, right? Now, I think that, a little
Yeah.
bit of flair and a little bit of personality is great. However, I feel like a lot of girls kind of overdo that, especially with the arms. I see a lot
Yeah.
of girls getting a little too funky with their arms to the point where, like, I always tell my girls, if I'm watching your posing and my eyes are going to your arms, that's not good because that's time spent away from looking at your physique, right? So, like, if the judges are looking at your
Yes.
arms or looking at like, ooh, that looks like a crazy transition, like that's time spent away
Yeah.
from them looking at your physique, right? So your posing should add to your physique. It should just be very polished, but it shouldn't be like the star of the show. It shouldn't be distracting. So I think simpler is better. Not to say you can't put a
Yeah.
little bit of flair into it, but I would say
Totally.
another big mistake I see, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, and see if you have any suggestions. And this is a question I get all the time, but a big mistake I see a lot of girls making, even just like going to shows and observing, is girls that will struggle with controlling their core, especially in the transition poses. And also,
Yes.
when the judges are comparing you in a lineup and you're sitting there and holding your front pose and you have to hold it for, let's say,
Yeah.
30 seconds, it can be really hard to control that waistline and control that core. So, what would you say? Like, what do you tell your posing clients? Like, what homework do you give them to help with that core control? Because I feel like that's just really, really important.
Yeah, that one is a tough one. Specifically in transitions, I will usually teach my clients, I just call it core blocking. So I'll teach them an arm movement that when they're making a transitional pose can block their core or lower abdomen. Because, we have a lot of pelvic tilt going on, like the tummy could be like pushing out in those transitional poses. So I'll try to intentionally, especially if a client needs it specifically, add like a core blocking, arm block, hand block, like whatever it is in those transition ones. As far as like front poses go, when my clients are on the sidelines, I'll suggest in order to like save their back and keep them fresh that they don't hold their front pose the entire time when they're on the sidelines waiting for call outs. I recommend they at least bounce between front pose and transition pose, or a majority of the time, I feel that it is safe to be in a transitional pose and saving that front pose for when you get to your call outs. And then as far as holding that front pose and call outs, Generally working on like shallow breathing, like not these big, deep breaths, right? Just like kind of shallow breathing through your chest. I've also heard people say the words like scoop and poop. So like you're sucking in your lower tummy and poop as in like you're bearing down. I don't know if you've ever heard that one.
I've never heard of that. Scoop and poop. That's hilarious. Well, I usually say
Yeah.
like the breathing through your chest, because I'll sometimes say like breathe through your teeth too. Like if you're smiling, like breathe
Yeah.
through your teeth. Like 'cause you
Yes, yes, yes.
don't want that belly breathing at all. And I always like to tell my
Yeah.
girls and cue them to like brace their core. So I always tell people like think of how like because when you're posing right it's hard because you're not you don't want to suck in, you don't want the rib flare, but you also don't want to like flex
Right.
abs because that just looks kind of blocky.
Yeah.
So I always tell girls like think about bracing your core as if like you're about to do a really heavy barbell back squat. You kind of brace your core. That's kind of what you want to do when you're
Yeah.
in your poses too. But I find too, so I know a lot of people talk about vacuums. I definitely think those can be helpful or beneficial. But I also know some girls that really struggle to do those and they just don't like doing
Yeah.
them. And I actually think so. This sounds kind of silly, but I think that some pelvic floor work can also help too, especially for like older competitors who may have had a
Yeah.
couple kids. Because a lot of times I feel like it's that lower stomach distension that gets a lot of
Yep.
people. And sometimes that can just be like gastrointestinal related, but sometimes it can also be core control. So I think doing some pelvic floor strengthening work can also transpire really well onto stage in that core control. So that's something I'll usually,
Okay.
talk about with my girls as well.
Nice. Also too, I think dance has helped me like when you think ballet, like everything's like upright and tight, and I always was taught as a kid to almost like you're saying brace your core. So naturally, like walking around, if you can do that in your daily activities and not just like have like a loose stomach all the time, it's like building strength in that core and it will help you for stage. So, in your daily life, when you're walking around, have like a little bit of bracing going on. I know that sounds crazy, but it's like training your core. It's like wearing braces on your teeth. So, like, if you're walking around with bracing throughout your day, it's going to be easier on stage.
Yeah, and I feel like that is probably one scenario where like a waist trainer could be really beneficial. I know there's so much like some people love them, some people hate them. I think that they can be good for like posture purposes or teaching you to kind of brace and hold your core. So I think
Totally.
that they can have a benefit in that way. But yeah, core control is so important. And I also think too, and I know this is something I never thought of when I first started competing, but one thing that is so important if you want to be a good poser is mobility and flexibility too.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
like that low back arch is a hard, especially like when
Yeah.
you start to learn that it's not just in your back pose that you have that low back arch, but it's also like it's in your
Okay.
front pose. Like you're always like basically tilting that pelvis, right? In a very
Yep.
unnatural way. So mobility and
Yeah.
flexibility is so important because if you're stiff and you don't stretch, you don't do mobility, you don't get routine body work, posing can be
Yeah.
really, really hard for sure.
I agree 100%. I will find with clients, if I ask them to try something, sometimes they'll just say, I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, that's your mobility. Like we'll find another way or a different version or something like that. So 100%. Work on that flexibility. Get one of those roller things if you can, stretch out your back. Like, yeah, maybe even take yoga if that's helpful. I don't know.
Right. No, I know. Yeah, yoga can be, I think, really helpful. Especially if you're somebody that just slacks on stretching on your own. Like throw on like a 20-minute
Hmm.
yoga flow on YouTube. Sit down and hold yourself accountable and do that. But yeah, I think stretching and mobility is really,
Yeah.
really important for posing. And I notice like when I'm slacking on my stretching or mobility, my posing is 10 times
Hmm.
harder, right? Like, so those two really go hand in hand. And I feel like that's something a lot of people don't think about. Any other just like random, very common mistakes you see a lot of girls making in their posing?
Yeah, I would say angles for sure, like hip angles. They need to be away from the judges in general so that we're creating a tiny waist. The more your belly button is pointing towards the judge, the wider your waist is going to look. Angles as in our shoulders sometimes get really kinked up when we have our hand on our hip, and we need those level shoulders. Angles, as in, if I don't fully rotate my upper body towards the judge, then I'm going to look pretty narrow up top. I feel like angles is a really good one. That can just be so easy to like miss, you know?
Oh, for sure. And it's like that's the hard thing too with angles. Like they are very specific upon the person, right? Because obviously, like there
Yeah.
are some people that just genetically have a bit of a blockier waist. So, like for those people, we may
Yeah.
have them turning their waist a little bit more to the front. Whereas people
Right.
who have a really tiny waist, we may have them turning a little bit more to the side. And it's all about finding what brings out shape best for some, for that particular physique, right? Because that's what bikini is all
Yeah.
about, is that shape. We don't want, you don't want the physique to look narrow and skinny. You want the physique to have nice shape, nice hourglass shape to it.
100%. Yeah. Like you said, specific to each person. We all have different structures, different hip widths, different clavicle widths, different amounts of muscle and things like that. So I feel like when you're hiring a posing coach, you're paying for knowledge, one, but you're paying to not have to go through all these trials and tribulations later in a show and have the judge tell you, yeah, your posing was off, or your angles were off, or you looked a little blocky, or we didn't get that S curve, or something like that. So you're paying for knowledge, and then to not have to deal with all of the issues later. And you're paying for somebody who's already been through it, and they have the cues, and they know the shapes, and they know how to build them, and they know how to teach them. So it's a lot less heartache that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so now that we've kind of gotten into some of the like common mistakes we see with posing, I know that you and I both we've put a question box up on Instagram. So I want to save some time and kind of go through those because I got a couple of like good variety ridden questions. So I want to kind of go through some of those, and then we can kind of talk to a little bit about like glam and suits and makeup and all that too. So you got some questions. Do you want to start with one of your questions?
Yeah. So one of the questions I got is like, what is your mindset, or how do you settle your nerves before stage? I kind of love this one. I think I've tricked myself into like just being calm, and just like, not like I don't care, but just like, this is me, like love me or leave me. So I wanted to share that with everyone. Before I go on stage, I am the bikini standard. I tell myself, I've worked hard. I got balance top to bottom. We got the glam. We got, the balance, and, all that good stuff. So I am the standard. I know that, right? I tell myself the judges want me to win. I really do believe that. I believe that they want all of us to come up there and bring our best, because if we're bringing our best, we're entertaining the crowd, we're making the IFBB and the NPC look good. So I truly believe that they want me to win. Like they're rooting for me to put on an amazing show, an amazing performance. Okay. So I know I'm the standard. I know they want me to win. So then I just tell myself, give them a presentation worthy of awarding. So I can just like be me. I can perform. I can have fun. I can enjoy the moment. And for me, it's like a little switch in my brain that makes it not be like, I hope they notice me. I hope they see me. I hope they like me. So that's what works for me. And I usually tell that to all my clients. So I hope that little mindset switch can help other girls too.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I sometimes tell girls before they step on stage, because I think a lot of like newer competitors have this idea that all like pros, or even like just any competitor in general, like we're all super confident when we go out on stage. And I always tell girls, I'm like, you'd actually be very surprised by how many competitors are really, really shy people, like in their normal life, right? But they just flip that switch when they
Right.
get on stage, and like they kind of like sometimes I'll tell people to create an alter ego for themselves. Like if they really do struggle with like
Yeah.
snapping into that stage aura, I'll say create an alter ego, right? Because some people really struggle with like in their normal day-to-day life they're just very shy, and that's kind of how they're known. So I'm like, create an alter ego name, as silly as it sounds, and snap into her
Right.
when you get on stage. So I like that question. Now
I love that.
somebody asked a question. I think this is a good one. I want to get your take on this. Any recommendation
Okay.
for the walk to the back. So for those of you listening, if you're an amateur,
Yes.
most of the time they don't have you walk to the back unless you're in an overall lineup. Now, that's not always the case. I've definitely seen in comparisons where judges will have girls walk to the back just in comparisons, but I mean, pros especially are walking to the back. So I think it's first, before we dive into like suggestions for the walk to the back, I think it's first important to know like what the judges are looking for there, and they are definitely looking for conditioning in the glutes, meaning they want to see like whose glutes are dropping, whose glutes are jiggling, whose glutes are moving. And they also may be looking for like, when girls are walking, if they see striations in the glutes, that's also not a great thing, right? So they're looking for, like, they're watching the glutes very closely if they're asking you to walk to the back. And generally that just differentiates girls who have the full round bubbliness versus the girls who may not, right? So what are your recommendations for that walk to the back?
Yeah, for tips for walking to the back, we're always going to have that pelvic tilt. So I like to say glutes to the gods. That's the cue that I use for my clients. So glutes to the gods. They're going to, yeah, we're going to pop them up there and just have that nice pelvic tilt. I also recommend we are going slow and we are matching the pace of the girls on either side of us. If you can imagine, an expediter is telling you, ladies, take 4 steps to the back. And if I just start going and I have 4 giant steps and the other girl takes 4 tiny steps, well, we're not really ending on the same line, are we? And now she might have the advantage of being closer and more, closer in distance to the judge, and I'm farther away. So I like to teach matching the pace, using those peripherals, making sure you're going the same speed. It also can feel really funny doing that back walk because you are going pretty slow and it's like 1 foot in front of the other, almost like you're walking the plank, if you will. Like you really don't want to get very far in that walk. Especially if the expediter is giving you a number of steps. It's a little bit different if they give you a line, because then, you should all be stopping at the exact same line. So you kind of have to pay attention to those differences. But another thing I still want to see when my clients walk to the back is I want to see each hip lead. So I don't want it to just be a very stiff walk. I need a little bit of motion in those hips for it to still feel natural and have a little swagger, if you will. So pelvic tilt, glutes to the gods. Yeah, all that good stuff.
I like the glutes to the gods. Yeah, I think one time I remember Paul told me, he said the phrase slow is pro when it comes to posing. Because I feel like a lot of girls, especially amateurs, when they're really nervous, like you see the ones that get on stage and they just fly through their routine, right? So he was always like, if you can just slow down, obviously don't be like obnoxiously slow, but like when you step foot on stage, if you can just take your time, that is going to really captivate the judges and make them be like, "Ooh, whoa, like who is this?" Right? So he always has used the term slow is pro. And I think that is really important for the walk to the back too, because it's like if you walk too quickly or you take too big of steps, you're probably going to see more of that jiggle in the glutes, which is exactly what the judges are looking for, right? They're looking for that, as a means to differentiate you between first place, right? So I like that question about the walk to the back. Let's see, what's any other questions that you got that you want to go, or what's another question that you got that we can go into?
Yeah. One person wrote in and they were like, how do you walk in heels? Like, how do you just get good at it? Right. So just like any other thing, I do teach walking. So having cues that will help you remember, like, what is my body doing? Sending videos of, look, this is a pro walking, and these are the cues that I'm reiterating to you, and this is proof that they look good in this walk. So I'll usually give you cues. I'll have you practice with homework. Like you said, breaking in your heels, walking around the house. The more you walk in heels, the more you walk using your cues, and the more time you put into it, the more natural it's going to be. Honestly, it sounds crazy, but you could do a whole 30-minute session just walking down and back, like literally easy. Just practicing all of those cues, trying to make it flow, feel natural. I've also heard Sandy say one of her favorite things or that just sticks out, or just a compliment that I've heard her give, is I've heard her say, right when you walked out. You know what I mean? Like in those first few seconds, if someone has a beautiful walk, a captivating walk, a beautiful look head to toe, and they know how to walk in heels and they're rocking it, the judges are going to be captivated by that, because like you said, not a lot of girls know how to walk comfortably or confidently in heels. So if you do, you're already going to be a standout.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the what Sandy has said about, just those first couple seconds, really set the tone for you as a competitor. So, and I also think when it comes to the walk, like, let's be honest, having a good, comfortable pair of heels can really help. And I know, like, for me, I don't walk in heels normally, like outside of posing a lot. So I don't know about you, but I love the Olympian 2.0s from the Shoe Fairy. They are so comfy,
Yes.
which sounds so crazy to say that a pair of heels is comfortable, but like,
Right.
if you've worn them, they are really comfortable. And I think that can be helpful, like, especially if you just don't walk well in heels, you're not used to them, get a pair of comfortable
Right.
heels, because if your heels are just flat out uncomfortable and your feet hurt in them, like, that's probably going to show in your walk. So I think that's worth mentioning too. Now
Definitely.
I have a question about, this is kind of where we can talk a little bit about suits too, because I know we both wear Angel Competition bikinis. We both have used them for a while
Right.
now, and so I had a couple questions that were kind of along the same question, and basically it's just how to pick the right bikini color, or what suits go best with certain skin tones, right? So I think, to put it in simplistic terms, I always typically say the jewel tones. So like your blues, your greens, your purples, sometimes your reds, those tend to be very standout colors on stage, because you want something that's really going to contrast well off of your skin, because you run the risk, like, if you have a color like a pink, like an orange, like a yellow, it may potentially kind of, like, I don't know, kind of blend in with your skin and not really pop a ton or contrast a ton off of your skin.
Right.
So I like to generally recommend the jewel tones to girls, but that's not to say those are the only colors we're limited to. I think it really just depends on the person, like your skin tone or your skin color, and also your hair color too.
Totally. 100%. I agree with that. Jewel tones is always good. I usually, if a girl's like a first time competitor, I usually feel the safest suit color you really can't go wrong with is like a royal blue, because no matter your natural skin tone, your natural hair color, like blue's the opposite of orange on the color wheel. So you'll have like high contrast against that tan.
Yeah.
But yes, jewel tones all the way. Blue, if you've never done a show and suits are expensive and you want something that will have contrast,
Mm-hmm.
blue is like a safe rule of thumb. But also, I think first time competitors don't even know you can have so much fun with the crystal combination on your suit. So you and I both might have the same royal blue hologram material, but you could add blues and greens, and I could be over here adding purples and blues, and it'll have a completely different effect. So that's kind of fun too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. The crystal combinations that you put on top of suits, it's so fun. So fun. But that's funny you mentioned the blue. That was my first suit color too. And I would agree. I think that's literally a color that pretty much anybody can pull off, along with green. I feel like green can be a really, like, a color that a lot of girls can pull off, especially, like, I know I get the question sometimes for, like, redheads, like, what color looks best on somebody who
Oh
has
yeah,
hair? And I generally like
totally.
green, like a Kelly or even emerald green on somebody with red hair, or even like a blue
Yeah.
purple, like that blurple, which is usually either a blue,
Blurple, yeah.
a blue or a purple fabric with the opposite crystal on top.
Yeah.
So a blue fabric with purple crystals, or a purple fabric with blue crystals. So, but yeah,
Right.
you can't go wrong with that. And something else I would recommend doing is, Lana and I both, we are with Angel Competition bikinis, and they have about every color posing suit you can imagine. So like, if you're really,
Yeah.
like, considering a certain color, let's say you've never stepped on stage before, and let's say you think like, ooh, I would love to maybe wear red, but I don't know if I would look good in red. Maybe order a
Right.
posing suit in that same red fabric and see how you like
Yep.
you know, the way you look in it, right? That's a great way to test out the color of the suit. Or another rule of thumb is like, if you know, hey, like every time I wear blue, I always get compliments, or every time I wear green, I always get compliments, that may be a good, you know, opportunity for you to test out a suit in that color. Like if you normally wear clothing in a certain color and you get a lot of compliments with it, maybe that's your color on stage, right? But I think jewel tones are generally going to be best. And I think also like well, now that we have this fit model division, I mean, that requires a very plain basic suit. But if we're talking in terms of bikini, I think like having an A-B stone on your suit too to provide that glisten can be really helpful too. So yeah, I think when in doubt, order a posing suit in a color that maybe you're kind of, you know, partial to, or that you want to test out. I think that can just be a great way to, you know, see what you look good in.
I do agree. I recommend the same for any of my posing clients. If they're first timers, I'll say orders the posing suit in the color you think you might want to order for show, right? Like that's the best way to test it out. And then I know you work with Angel. I don't work with Angel like on the business side, but I also tell my clients, like, I'll hop on the call with you. If you're ordering your suit, like I would love to do that with you because I want to make sure that we're getting everything right. I don't want like it to be show day and we should have ordered a smaller coverage bottom for you, or you have a smaller chest and we ordered a molded and then we're finding out like that we're gapping and stuff like that when we probably should have done a standard cup and just added some padding and things like that. So I love to hop on the calls. Lexie's a suit stylist. Savannah's an amazing suit stylist. You guys obviously know what you're doing, but I'll hop on calls if a girl is ordering from another company too, just because I want to make sure that all those boxes are ticked and that she feels so good on the day of show, because something like suit cut, suit colors, suit coverage, all of those things, they matter. It's crazy, but they matter. They can change the shape of your physique.
They really can. Yeah. And honestly, I've seen it before too, where if a girl gets a suit that just doesn't fit super well, like maybe it's wearable, but maybe it's like it just doesn't fit perfectly, like that really wears on people's confidence too. Like if you know that your suit top it's maybe it's bunching and it's too big, but like you can still wear it, like that's going to probably show in your confidence on stage. And I know a big thing this year especially has been the bottoms, like the cut and the coverage of the front, right? I know they've really been down on, they've been, I know that like the Manions have talked about how there's been some girls wearing suit bottoms that have been way too low in the front. So it's really important to have suit bottoms that are going to cover things, but also that are going to have like, you want to get a pair of bottoms that's going to have the correct back coverage, because that can, that's like a very minuscule detail, but it is really important. And even as, simple of a detail as where a girl wears her bottom connectors, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll have girls and they'll put on their suit and I'll say, hey, like your bottoms are way too high up and it's making your glutes look super long. You need to pull them down a little. Like that stuff is really important. And it sounds so minute, but like it really can, if we're talking, especially if you're at, let's say, a national level show and everybody is a good competitor up there, like those little details can really, really matter the higher up you go.
Sorry, I have 3 golden retrievers and they think they heard something.
Oh, that's so funny. No, you're good. You are good. I'm surprised. I'm actually at home right now too, and we have 2 dogs in the house. I'm surprised they haven't barked yet. So
okay, sorry about that. But you were saying, the proportions of where you're wearing your suit will affect whether they're too high, too low, long glutes, small glutes. If they're too low, they're cutting off your glutes. So when you're in those posing sessions with your clients, you're like, hey, can you adjust your bottoms for me? And it just changes their whole shape and physique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, did you get any other suit questions on your side?
No, but a common one, girls will be like, when do I order my suit? So usually they say about like 12 weeks out is when you're placing your order, right? Putting in that custom order that you're making a custom suit, right, Lexie?
Yeah. I typically tell girls like by the very latest 8 weeks out. And I guess the next
Okay.
question I always get, and I'm sure you probably get this too, a lot of girls are sometimes hesitant to order that far out because they're like, well, I still have weight to lose. Like, how am I going to make sure this fits? So, like, as a suit stylist, I can just tell people, like, we'll get your measurements, and then we'll also, like, for Angel, we always ask, okay, what is your anticipated weight loss, right? And that's going to be how the seamstress
Yeah.
sizes specifically those bottoms to fit you at your stage weight. Now, the beautiful thing about, I think most suit companies do this, but I know Angel for sure does this, is they offer free alterations. So, like, let's say you get your suit and you're 2 weeks out and you're like, oh crap, my bottoms are way too tight. You can send it back. It's a very easy alteration for the side connectors. So, but yeah, I typically recommend, like, 12 weeks out, like, start to kind of think about ordering, looking, at least getting an idea of what you want to order, maybe talk to your coach, do a suit consultation, and then, order by that 8 week out mark. Now, if you are crunched for time and let's say your show is like 4 weeks out, there's still ways to get your
Yeah.
shoot. It's just obviously it's a little bit more, stressful when you're getting it that soon to your show, but there are ways to order your suit that, that late if needed too. Now, another question I got, this isn't about the suit, but I think this is a good question, is about hair. So somebody asked, how do we feel about hair on stage being worn like half up, half down? So do you have an opinion on that?
I will say I have not seen it half up and half down. At most, I've seen for different categories, not bikini, but maybe for figure or physique, where they'll do like really cool braids and like one side is kind of done back or something like that. Or with Amy Delgado, I've seen her wear like a really pretty barrette in her hair on one side to pull it back. I've never heard the judges say anything negative about a half up, half down. I honestly just don't think I've seen people do it. I've definitely seen ponytails for, women's bodybuilding, women's physique, the fitness category, things like that. But I don't know if anyone's tried. Have you ever seen anyone try a half up?
I feel like I have. It's just not very common. Like, maybe once every like 3 shows I go to, I may see one girl. But
Yeah.
I think the key is, like, I don't think there's anything, maybe if you like kind of pin back one side, but I think the biggest thing is you just don't want to, like, provide a distraction, right? Like, if you stand
Right.
out on stage because you're the only girl wearing her hair half up and half down, like, do I really think realistically it would hold you back? No. But I think it's just always
Yeah.
safe to, don't like don't try to do something that's gonna stand out, like, in a, oh whoa, like, her hair looks different than, everybody else's. Like, I would say on stage it's not a time to try to like stand out a ton with like the way you're doing your hair,
Right.
styling your hair, or what suit you're wearing. Like, you really want to kind of stand,
Right.
you want to kind of fit in with those things, right? You don't want it to be a distraction. Now, I do think though, like, hair fullness is important. And I know I always get the question of like, can you go on stage with short hair? Is that okay? And my answer is absolutely, right? But like, I do think there's a lot to be said, even if you have short hair, like, if you naturally have thinner hair, sometimes
Yeah.
getting like clip-in extensions, or if you already have extensions, great. But like, adding a little bit of fullness, I think, can be really helpful
Yes.
for hair.
Definitely. I do recommend that 100%. I'll refer to Sandy again. They're looking for like a healthy look. So that includes your hair. If your hair is, getting happen to get thinner, or you just already have thinner hair, or maybe you dyed it a lot and it got thinner, or whatever it is, you need to add back in that fullness with some clip-ins, add back in that shine with some shine spray if that's necessary for you. Maybe do a little gloss treatment on your hair before show. So you're trying to give off the vision of like health and wellness. So if you get to show with dry, crusty, like hay like hair, I'm just gonna make a joke, because bleaching your hair, let's be real, having blonde hair like damages your hair. You gotta add back in that health and add back in that shine. So I agree with you. I thought of, while you were talking, I thought of one instance where maybe a half would totally be appropriate
Okay.
if you do have more of like that curly girl, like voluminous hair. Potentially maybe clipping or pinning it in some way if it's taking over your delts could be appropriate. I don't know, you know?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, because I mean that leads another good thing to touch on is like if your hair is really really poofy or like just naturally you have
That's
very voluminous hair, I think it's
right.
important to like make sure it's not covering your shoulders, right? Like if your hair is,
Yeah.
or even like I've seen instances of girls in their back posts where their hair is really really big and poofy and it covers like everything
Yep.
top and then like it covers their shoulders and it takes away
Right.
from their V taper. So that, yeah, that's a good point. And I would say almost at that point, like if your hair is really voluminous, I would almost like maybe hire somebody the day before, or not the day before, but like the day of your show to do your hair so that maybe they could like kind of make it a little bit smaller. So that way it's not too poofy and like covering everything up top.
Right.
That is a little detail that could potentially,
Yeah.
knock you down as if your hair is completely covering your upper body. Well, that could be, a little detail that costs you too. So, yeah. Any other questions so that you got that you want to go over?
Honestly, in the beginning part, you answered a lot of questions that we already had. There's only one that we didn't answer from my question box. It was strategy of picking shows. I don't know if you want to go first or your thoughts.
Yeah, and I feel like a while ago, Paul Evan and I did a podcast about this. I could be wrong, but I have to go back. But we could always redo this topic too, because we could go into so much detail on this. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times it's going to come down to like, what is your goal, right? Like, are we a pro trying to qualify for the Olympia, or are we just an amateur who's never even stepped on stage before, right? So like, it has a lot to do with your goal. Or if you, let's say, you stepped on stage several times as an amateur, and like the next goal is to turn pro. Yeah, you may want to be kind of strategic with like, okay, let's pick a show where we know Sandy Williamson is going to be the head judge or Tyler Mannion is going to be the head judge, right? But I would say it's really going to be dependent on your goal and where you're at as a competitor, like, and what the next stepping stone is, right? So that's kind of like my loose question to that, but it's so dependent on the person.
Right.
Best case scenario, if you have a coach, discuss this with your coach, right? Like I love talking strategy with my clients depending on where they're at. Like, I have some girls that are going to get on stage this year and this is not their first season and, they want to go to nationals. So we're going to talk about a strategy for that and potentially getting them behind, a Tyler or a Sandy or, one of these top level judges before we even go to nationals.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like as a pro, some of the things that I think of are the timing of the year, right? When is that going to fit in with my prep and me being lean and me cutting and all of those things? B, who is the judge that I want to see and whose feedback am I needing before, like trying to make my way to Olympia or before I get to Olympia, like whose feedback am I really wanting, like a Sandy or a Tyler or one of those head judges, right? And then C, a fun one for me, because if you do compete frequently, you might as well visit a new place. I know that sounds funny, but if it's a new state or if it's an all women show, I really love the all women shows like Girl Power, the Phoenix one, Nashville. They're so fun. If you've never done an all women show, I really, really like those. But visiting a new place, I think that's another, if you can fit that in the list of what you're doing, I think that's so fun too.
I would agree with that. Paul told me that once too. He was like, I get to go to so many cool new places by just traveling to shows. And I was like, that's a good point because I mean, living in Florida, there's plenty of options, right? But like I know
Right.
in 2023, I went to Austin, Texas for the Republic of Texas, and I'd never been there before. And it was like, I don't really do much traveling outside of like competing, but I think that that's a great opportunity to do a little bit of a travel or like just a little weekend getaway, right?
Yeah.
To a new place, have a
Totally.
day after your show where you stay an extra day just to kind of explore, right? Yeah, that can be really fun.
Absolutely.
And I think also like some strategy, also it, let's be realistic here, can come down to finances too. If somebody may not want to or may not be able to travel to a ton of different shows, right? So we may want
Right.
to focus on, okay, what are some local shows that we can hit that are good shows, right? So this is definitely
Yes.
something, there's a lot that can go into strategy, but like I would highly recommend talk with your coach and that's where I would start, but that's a good question. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Well, so to
Did you get any more good ones?
I feel like we kind of mentioned everything like based off of like, I feel like we kind of answered most of the questions I got, with like, cause I got a lot of questions and like the walk to the back and the hair questions. So, you know, I want to kind of I want to wrap things up by, I want you to plug your posing business too. Cause I think I want you to plug yourself, because you do such great work with all the girls you work with. I know you work with, you know, some of my girls, some of Paul's girls. I know Paul thinks very highly of your posing company. So plug yourself a little bit and tell the people too, if they're not following you, where they can find you.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So let's see if I remember all the socials correctly. If you want to work with me, I usually do recommend a consult just to make sure that we're going to vibe together and that I'm providing the services that you're looking for. You can find me on my website. It is polished-presentations.com, but also on my Instagram. You can find the hyperlink for that in my bio. And my Instagram is ifbbpro_Lana. It's LAWNA. That's how you spell my name. But yeah, I love to do consults with people, making sure that we're going to gel and mesh and all those good things. And I am very descriptive in that consult, what it would look like to work with me. I will walk you through what the first session looks like, the second session, the third session, just so you can have that visual and know the amount of detail of the service that you're paying for, right? So I like to paint that picture with people and just, you know, get to know their background, what their goal is, where they're going, and what that looks like for them. So, yeah, check me out on the website. You can also find the hyperlink in my Instagram, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram as well. Also, my Polished Presentations Instagram, you can find on my IFBB Pro page too. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure a lot of people listening probably all already follow you. But if not, they should definitely go and check you out, because I love all the content you put out, and you are really great at what you do with the posing side of things too. So I appreciate you taking the time this Sunday before Christmas to be on. And to all of our listeners, this will be up on YouTube. Apologies if there's any like little editing glitches. I'm gonna edit this together because we lost connection a second ago, but I'm going to edit it all together the best I can. But drop a comment on YouTube if you're listening. And if you have any questions for either myself or for Lana, feel free to comment. I always try to go back and comment back to all the people that comment on our YouTube. And then also, if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love if you shared it on Instagram, tagged us both. We'd love to see that. But thank you for being on, Lana, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back on here, in another future episode too.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you, Lexie. It was so fun.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.